Welcome to another Olmstead Therapy Talk. In these talks, I explore the realm of cognitive behavioral therapy and delve into how our thoughts shape our inner world, our external behaviors, and our mood. So this talk is titled Anxiety, Order versus Chaos. The words and concepts of worry, anxiety, and fear are often interchangeable both in modern literature and in ancient literature. This shows that how closely they're related to each other. And in this talk, I'm explaining one way I view the relationship of these three things: anxiety, worry, and fear. So worry is a behavior of anxiety. And anxiety is more or less an emotional symptom of fear. Fear is the more primitive or primal state of heart, a disposition or orientation of the heart, deeper than emotion. One's heart is oriented towards something in a state of fear, and by implication, oriented away from something else, and we'll get to that. One's heart is oriented towards something in a state of fear, and anxiety becomes a symptom of that fear. Worry is often experienced as like running thoughts or behaviors about one's circumstance. And the running thoughts is called rumination. That or other suboptimal behaviors, attempting to control or manipulate outcomes to more favorable ends, or what's perceived as a favorable end. And I like to describe this as like a tree. So the leaves are on the tree blowing in the wind. They're in motion, they're movement. That's the worry thoughts, the worry behaviors. And they're supported by the trunk, which is the anxiety. The anxiety supports, the worry grows out of the anxiety. But what supports the anxiety, the trunk, is the roots underneath the ground, and that's fear. The underlying fear out of which anxiety grows, and the worry is usually the most visible component of that. Worrying less, therefore, starts with reducing anxiety. But reducing anxiety, in the end, starts with a reorientation of the heart to address the underlying fear. All along the way, however, there are necessary, or at least helpful bridge solutions to reduce symptoms or address behavior modification. There needs to be more than this, but not less than this. For example, the behavior of worry thoughts and actions may be addressed by challenging unhelpful thought patterns and replacing them with new helpful thought patterns. More specifically, for one example, if someone catastrophizes, that is to say, they consider the worst possible outcome to be inevitable. If someone suffers with that, the sufferer can learn to challenge this thought pattern with more scientific and rational thinking about possibilities, probabilities, and the reasonable outcomes, and their own ability to deal with them, that they have more resources than they give themselves credit for, and perhaps the risk is like a lot less probable or a lot less threatening than they think. That's one example. Symptom reduction and behavior modification are only temporary, and they're not enough, but too often behavior modification and symptom reduction, or coping skills, are the sole goal of mental health professionals. Symptom reduction, coping skills, behavior modification don't really penetrate to treat the real problem down to the roots. Bridges help this while the sufferer gets to the underlying fear, but bridges get you from point A to point B. Bridges are not a destination. Okay? The underlying fear must be addressed for more sturdy anxiety and worry relief. Toward what is the heart oriented? That's a root question. Toward what is the heart oriented? So let's cut through a lot of noise and get right down to the deep existential pay dirt. There are two main ways to live: according to order or according to chaos. Now, those who are more initiated into symbolic thinking like this, or Jungian thinking, will recognize my binary framing of that is probably a little problematic, but go with me at this level. There's two ways to live: according to order or according to chaos. Either the heart's disposition regards chaos as ultimate, or it regards order as ultimate. Order is chaos put into proper shape, livable and predictable shape. Chaos, on the other hand, is experienced as complete unpredictability, nothing in control, everything or anything potentially destructive. The universe in a chaos is experienced as capricious and unsafe, always a potential disaster. And in this case, the sufferer feels the anxiety of a mad world or of mad circumstances on which he's focused. No wonder the sufferer feels such anxiety. In such a case, he feels like he must do all of the ordering himself, which is where the behavior of worry comes in, with its rumination of thoughts and often erratic behaviors. It's erratic battle plans to organize the chaos. If chaos is ultimate and there just is no order, or if order is weak, then order must be imposed for things to make sense and for things to be safe. The sufferer in this case takes the role of God. The sufferer in this case takes the role of the orderer of the chaos. This is the role described in the creation narrative in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. It's the creation narrative. The sufferer implicitly doesn't believe that narrative or that God has ordered things, but takes that role on himself and creates meaning for himself, creates meaning out of the chaos. It inevitably implies belief in his own personal creation myth as he attempts to order things for himself. His faith is in himself. Faith is inevitable. Trust is inevitable. His faith is either in himself, or maybe he exports his faith to someone else's narrative that this human being can order the chaos for me, and I will believe and obey and do everything according to what this other person says. Could be a church leader, could be a family member, could be a spouse, could be a cult leader, could be a YouTube influencer. Goodness, could be anything. The point is, faith is ultimately, I think, in himself, for having chosen the orderer, that orderer will do it for me. Okay? So faith, I think, ultimately at the bottom, beyond which you can't go, faith is in himself. He trusts himself to have made the right decision or to be able to order it himself. Because there is no other help. There is no God. There is no ordering, which is terrifying. Terrifying. It's fear, anxiety, worry. But let's switch gears a little bit. And perhaps instead of there's only two ways to live according to order or according to chaos, we may say there's only two great fears. Okay? The fear of God, but then also simply fear itself, fear turned in on itself, fear having no other focus but the churning chaos of a world without any perceived order, a world without any perceived purpose, a world without any perceived meaning, except the meaning we construct. Orienting the heart toward God, however, considers order to be ultimate. Now, the world may still contain the unpredictable and the unsafe, according to human experience, but ultimately, the universe is predictable and safe. If God is Father, then I am not an existential orphan. I'm not left out in the cold, dead cosmos after all. There still be problems, but they're relative problems, not absolute problems, because they're not ultimate. Anxiety may still be felt, of course, but it becomes manageable, since ultimate order has my welfare in mind. Difficulties then therefore become windows of opportunity for self-knowledge and growth in the virtues, like courage to face difficulties. We may then engage in streams of divine energies or divine grace embedded in creation. Creation is no longer this terrifying place that's out to get me, but it's a wellspring of potential life rather than ultimate potential destruction. And this is realistic because it recognizes there's still difficulties and extreme suffering in the world, but it contextualizes or positions it in its proper place that it's not ultimate. That's the key. So it is realistic thinking here. And this can take into account the worst types of suffering and difficulties. This thinking, this positioning, this trust, this faith transforms us and fosters a progressive increase in God-likeness. The more we participate in the order, the more like order we become, the more God-like we become. And indeed, this is taught in the tradition. So Jesus Christ even issues an unbelievable command. Do not be anxious, or do not worry. It's an imperative in the Greek. And the Greek word can be translated either way, anxiety or worry. And it is in English translation. And if he issues a command, then we're able to do it. The expectation is it's possible to choose not to worry. It's possible to choose a path other than anxiety. And he said this in the Sermon on the Mount. But why did he issue this command? So toward the end of the section in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus indicates the source of worry or the source of anxiety by saying, "Oh, you of little faith. Oh, you of little faith." And faith is a synonym for trust. So in other words, distrust of God is the source of anxiety and worry. Orienting away from order and towards the chaos, orienting away from God and towards fear itself. This in turn signifies one's deeper fear is oriented towards primal chaos rather than towards divine order, which divine order created all things by mastering chaos on our behalf. So reorienting one's heart toward God, therefore, provides the conditions for muscular living, such as the virtues of courage and faith, which is trust, in the very face of hardship. This is the deeper stuff that coping mechanisms can only be a bridge while we do the deeper work of this sort of therapy, this existential therapy, this belief therapy or values clarification therapy, which is the deep stuff. And this way of approaching it does not deny hardship in irrational blindness or in blind faith, fideism. No. But it recognizes hardship as conquerable because it has been conquered. So there are only two fears. There is the unhealthy passion of fear that grips our hearts with an out-of-control anxiety. This fear must be fought and mastered by the other fear, the fear of God, orientation towards order. Fearing God means reverent awe and submission to the way the world is ordered, rather than demanding the world be ordered in a different way, or rather than insisting that I can order it. So let us engage the order and live accordingly, humbly accepting the way things are and stop fighting against the universe, which just bruises our souls. So if any of this rhymes with your experience, connect with me today on my website, fill out the contact form, book an appointment with me. See you next time.